back to the shop. So I have been working on this hood trying to flatten it out. I've gone out to get some 2K primer. So I want to shoot this in 2K primer. It'll be the first time I'm actually going to use a spray gun, so that'll be interesting, and I'll record that as a newbie. But when I started prepping the hood in order to shoot it, and I was just simply blocking it with, I guess, about a 180, just something to kind of knock the tops off. That's when you really start to notice the low and high spots. This is a 50-year-old hood. 50 years of opening and closing it, causing it to bend, causing some of the metal to pop, and then of course it was in an accident. So it's not going to be unusual that there are going to be irregularities in the metal. In fact, there are so many, I'm almost getting to the point, as you can see in the front, to skim coat the entire hood. Now, in order to get rid of the low spots and get rid of the high spots, the only way you can do it is either try to hammer and dolly it, right? Trying to get the high spots down and the low spots up. But basically, you're always going to get a wave. There's nothing you can do with a hammer that is going to flatten the metal. There's just no way to do it, so you are going to have to use filler. And like I said, so I'm at the point here where I've started to skim coat the hood. I thought I could fix little spots, but you can't. As soon as I did that, I can start getting through to the metal here again, and you can start seeing the high spots. So you got to stop sanding, because the sander, even though it's a rigid board, is going to ride across the high spots, but it's still going to deflect down and start to hollow out the filler. You got to stop. As soon as you see metal, you got to stop. And what you got to do is, I've already see here now, I got 1 and 2 areas here that as I was sanding, it's not even touched. You can still see the original texture of the body filler. So this is low. I'm never going to sand that out. I've got to bring that up. So I'm going to have to now skim coat this again, sand it again, and I'm going to probably do this 2 or 3 times to try to get this hood to be flat. So mixed up some filler. 2 things. Get one of these filler pads. What happens is that you can peel each sheet off. It gives you a nice clean surface to mix all the time. I'm also using metal. I've tried the plastic. And what I find with the plastic is the plastic will actually get maybe a nick in it, or the plastic will get something on it. And then every time you use it, you're gonna see like a line or something that it's dried through, right? So any deformity at all in the plastic is going to translate when you put the filler on. I find the metal is great because the metal won't get any nicks in it, and like I said, so as I mentioned, I have a couple of low spots here. But what I need to do is, even though I'm shining through the metal on both sides and there's a low spot in the center, I'm actually going to go over the metal as well, the high spot. And the reason is because what you really want to do is get it to the point where you're not going to have a high spot. So it's going to be all the same. So, like I said, just to bring that spot up, I have over here as well. Now what you can do is you can come in from this side, and again, bring in the filler this way. And that will, and like I said, see, I played with it too much. I dragged something through it there. So now I got to go back and do a little bit of a correction. So this area has now been filled up to where I need it. I also have a low spot in here, right? I've hit metal, it's low, so I'm going to be taking this as well. And this way here, I'm just going to come in this way and try to get a filling here. And that way there, now I can work on this area as well to flatten it out. But see what I mean? Look at the size of the area I'm putting down just to correct a couple of spots, because you can't just lift the spots. You've got to take the whole area into consideration. And when I block this back down, I'm going to keep sanding until I almost hit. You're going to start seeing the metal coming through the filler. The filler is going to become translucent. You're going to see the metal. As soon as you see it stop, hopefully by that time the whole area has been sanded. If there's areas where it hasn't been sanded, you're back to it again. You've got to keep on feathering it and then cleaning it up. Now on this side here, I also had a little bit of spots, so I'm just going to use a little bit more of the filler while we're standing. So again, between the high spots, I'm bringing in the filler between the high spots. And again, like I said, this is all, most of this is going to be sanded off, but basically that is the key. And that gives me the ability now to bring all these low spots up and all of the high spots to match. Now what I've also done is that I applied new Bondo at the front, so as it's hardening, I was sanding here. That gives that a chance to harden. And then once this is sanded, before I go to sand that, any imperfections I fill, this then will allow this to cure while I'm sanding up here. And that gives me the ability, instead of just sitting back for 30 minutes every time, or 15 or 20 minutes, depending on how much hardener you put in, basically what it gives you the chance to do now, let this harden up. I'm going to sand the front. Any imperfections there I'll fill, come back here, sand the back, and I'm going to do this, and this is just the hood. I'm hoping the fenders are a little bit better and the doors are a little bit better, but basically I'm probably going to end up having at least 30 hours, 40 hours into the hood alone. As you know, the bottom was a mess, I've cleaned that up. The top was a mess, I'm cleaning that up. But this is just a rinse and repeat process, and don't get frustrated. Okay, so I'm sitting down, not because I'm lazy, but if I stand up, my head's up here. So I've been working on this with the 120. Just to let you know though, go on Amazon and just simply pick up a DuraBlock sanding kit. It comes in a box. It's not that expensive. I think it's about $70 or $80. But of course you get the flat block. You get a shorter block, obviously, for getting into smaller areas. You get a round block, and then of course then you get an assortment of little guys. I haven't used these guys, but eventually I might have to on the body. But the reason you need the round one is because whenever you come to a body line that has got an angle in it, right, you can't hit that with this. I mean, you can't get in there. So what you can do is you simply wrap your sandpaper around the disc, and now what you can do is you can actually work into the corner, and while you're working in here, the rounded edge obviously will go inside of the rounded surface. Now never do this again, because you're just going to cut a groove, right? So everything has always got to be into it, into an X. And then again, I'm rolling, as I am sanding, I'm rolling the unit, and that is allowing me to kind of go up into the groove. And that way there, what we do is we cut a nice line down the body line. It keeps this body line true, right? Because again, I'm going to be running it up this way. So again, it's going to flatten the area this way. It's going to flatten the area that way. And of course up here, that was flattened by the other one. But like I said, so what you're doing again is never just sit there and try to get into it and start sanding like this. Again, like I said, you'll just create a cut. So like I said, get different assorted sanding blocks, get different assorted sanding papers, 80 grit to do the major cut. I'm using, as I said before, the 120 as a way to get rid of the sanding from the 80, but also now this really starts to get smooth now. I mean, you run your hand over it. Your hand will feel any irregularities. You will. And if you can feel it, you will see it. Like when you spray this, and you could feel a bit of an irregularity, you will absolutely see that irregularity. So what you're doing is, like I said, you're just trying to get it so that it's smooth, flat, and like I said, you can see I've still got some shiny bits here, but that's on the edge. You can see that really rolls over heavy, and you're okay with that as long as you're feathered in. It's when you really get those high shiny spots, right? Again, this is dull, and I know you can't really see that on the camera, but there's a big difference between getting a super shiny spot and a dull spot, is that where the paper has just been dragged across it, so it's really not cutting it yet, and that's where I stopped again. And you can see, and again, it's tough maybe from the camera, but right here, it's a little darker, and that's because I actually can start seeing the metal, so I stopped. And this is where now I'll take an evaluation, take a look and see whether or not there's places I can fill it again. And I'm going to be doing the same thing on the other side. And by the time I'm done here, if I do need any filler, I'll obviously fill it, and then I'll start sanding back here, because obviously now the 20 minutes have gone by from me sanding up here, that this is now hard and I can hit this with the 80. So, and as I said, rinse and repeat. I'm going to be doing this probably, for the next couple hours, if not the rest of today. So I may not get around to the 2K until tomorrow. Which is dangerous, because in my shop there is some moisture, right? It's snowing outside. I'm in Canada. Even though the heater is on, there's still moisture, and any exposed metal is going to want to start rusting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue working on the body, and then when I'm ready to shoot, that's when I'm going to hit it with the 180, and I'm going to go over, and if there's any stainless, any steel that looks like it's even starting to dull, which means it's starting to corrode, hit it with the 180, clean this whole thing off with the 180, and then I'm going to hit it with the surface prep, then I'm going to hit it with the cleaner, and then I'm going to hit it with the tack rag, and then I'm going to hit it with the 2K. Like I said, it might be tomorrow though. But for you, it'll be in the next few minutes. Talk to you then. Forgot, one last great sanding tool you have is your hand. Now, if you are going to use your hand to try to get into areas that the blocks aren't working or something else isn't working, make sure you turn the paper almost like 4 layers thick. Because if you only put in 1 layer thick and you put your fingers on that, the ridges in your fingers will absolutely translate into the paper. So this actually will no longer become a flat surface, it'll actually have ridges. The second thing is once you've taken the paper and turned it into 4, which gives a little bit of thickness, when you do use your fingers like this and you are going to sand, you never sand straight back and forth, because again, your fingers will cut grooves. But if you do this way, if you bring your fingers this way and you run them that way, then at least what you're going to get is that you're going to get a smoother cut, because you're going to be running along this way of your fingers, not that way. You can see the little ridges, obviously, where you don't get them that way. There are going to be places where you have to use your hands. You just can't get into some of the nooks and crannies with any of the tooling. You need to put your hands in there. And like I said, if you just simply take the paper, roll it into 4 so it's got a nice thickness to it, so that when I press on it, the weight will distribute itself evenly across the paper, you'll get a much smoother cut. Again, like I said, just wanted to mention that. Okay, we're getting close. Basically, this has required a lot more filler than I thought it would. But as I said, you get little bumps, little bonks, people rested on it, people pushed it, everything changes the contour of the metal. And I've had to quite literally almost fill the whole thing in order to try to get this flat. If I wouldn't have done this and I would have painted it, you would have just literally seen in the clear coat, the waves on this. And this is going to take me hours. I mean, I've still got a low spot over here. I don't know if you can see that, but right in there it's dark. That's because the sander, the block is not hitting that. And again, you have to stop. You can't go to get rid of that, because if you get rid of that, you will distort the whole thing. So you've got to stop and put more filler in to bring this up, so that when you're sanding, it's almost like a guide coat, right? You are trying just to knock it all down at the same time. When you can't knock it all down at the same time, something's wrong. You're either a little low or a little high. But basically, I need to fill a little bit more here, but I'm really happy with this now. So I am going to be able to put some filler there. I'll finish sanding the back, because that I had to do again. You can see it's getting huge now. Originally, this was only a couple of spots here and there, but again, I could not flatten it. You cannot flatten it if you just are doing the spots, because you're always going to go between the ridges. It's always going to become a valley, and you have to go above the highest part and then bring it down until the highest part is just starting to show. And then if you still have low spots, you got to fill that even more. So basically, you either got to hammer those high spots down, or lift the low spots, or you're going to have to do what I had to do, and that is literally skim coat 60% of the hood surface in order to sand it and flatten it out. So I'll finish up here, I'll sand back there. Tomorrow will be the day. Hopefully get this into 2K. Already rusting. I don't know what metal they used back in the 60s. I don't know if it had more iron in it than normal or what. But on some of the metal, the exposed metal, you can start seeing the brown rust literally forming on the metal. And this can happen in a day, even a half a day, it already starts to form. So, when you're starting to do this type of work, make sure that you're ready to spray when you're done, because every day you leave it out without spraying it, you are going to get surface rust, and that eventually might rust up through your paint job. So you want it all gone. Anyways, I'll see you in a few minutes. So as I said, for you, It's a minute. For me, it's been a day. This is the next day already. I had to obviously continue to fill and sand until I was able to remove all of the low spots, which means when you sand, you're going to cut the filler, and the filler is going to obviously not have any spots that are untouched. So I did that everywhere, the best I could anyways, I hope. First time body work, so this ought to be fun. Now, I've got the panel hanging because I want to throw the 2K primer filler on both the front and the back. I might as well. Now, if this was base coat or if I was painting this panel, there is no way that you would hang this. Why? You have to paint the panel in the orientation that that panel is going to sit on the car, because when you paint, paint flows. And if you paint a vertical surface like this and then lay it down, the light will refract differently off of it than if it was painted when it was lying down. That's why you never paint anything that's not in the orientation of what it eventually is going to be. But with me, it's primer, it doesn't matter, right? It's going to be covered. So I just want something easy. I'm going to flow the paint down. If it drips on the ground, again, it's going to be the first time I'm using a paint gun. This ought to be fun.